Traps are a body part that many people oversimplify. Just do some shrugs and upright rows, as most guys will say, as those are really the only two exercises that target the traps directly. But in real world scenarios, it's not the guys that just throw in a few extra sets of shrugs at the end of back day that have the most impressive traps. It's the guys with a solid overall training program that covers the entire body that generally have the most impressive traps. And in order to fully develop this muscle group, we're going to have to structure a plan that 1. Builds muscle mass across the entire body, 2. Gets you brutally strong at a few key fundamental movements, and 3. Is adequate in training volume for that specific muscle group. It's not just about getting stronger on shrugs to build more mass to the traps, but about getting stronger on a few key movements that might not work the traps directly, but carry over into trap development or trap training. And today we're going to be covering those best exercises that you need to be doing if you want massive traps. Number 1 is the deadlift, or any hip hinge movement. While the deadlift doesn't directly target any one muscle group specifically, it's going to hammer the back, the glutes, the hamstrings, and with that comes a lot of trap work to support that kind of weight. If you ever look at some of the best deadlifters in the world, most have very impressive traps, and a lot of them, they don't even do shrugs. For this exercise, you could even do stiff leg deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, or you could even use the trap bar here. And you'll get all the benefits of heavy hip hinges for the traps. The major advantage here is the load that you could lift on this movement, which is generally much more than the weight you could use on a proper shrug. And this exposes the traps to heavier loads than you might otherwise use. For example, if I'm deadlifting, I might be using 400 to 500 pounds, but if I'm performing shrugs, I might only be using 200 to 300 pounds. The second exercise that you want to be performing is a heavy rowing movement. When we look at the traps, most people just think about the muscles that we see on the front of the body, the muscles that tie in from the shoulder to the neck. But the traps are actually a fairly large muscle group that tie in all the way down to the middle of the back. And this middle and lower trap area gets hit very hard on all rowing movements, as the lower traps pull the scapula back. And while the middle and lower traps might get worked a little harder on a rowing movement, the upper traps are still hit very hard. And what I want you guys to do when you're starting to think about developing a specific muscle group is think about what exercises carry over to the development of that specific muscle group, rather than focusing on just one single exercise that directly targets that muscle. And when you understand what those exercises are, you can plan your entire training so that you get the benefits out of all of them. And the next exercise that we're going to cover here is heavy pressing movements, specifically shoulder pressing, but this goes for any heavy pressing movement. Because the traps are a back muscle, but also insert into the shoulders, the traps are basically worked in every pulling and every pressing movement to some degree. And the traps are indirectly worked in pressing movements very different than they are in shrugging movements. Again, this is a case where you'll see some of the strongest overhead pressers have massive traps, but many might not even perform shrugs. And if you're watching this video, you're probably also interested in gaining muscle mass to the entire body. And you're probably doing all the movements that I already listed. But what you need to understand is, if you're not prioritizing these movements, your trap development will likely suffer. Even exercises like barbell squats. You might not think about it, but your traps have to support that heavy weight on your back. This actually trains the trap muscles fairly hard. And again, it's why you see stronger guys walking around with well-developed traps. Now, the last exercise that we're going to cover here is one that's directly targeting the traps and is an isolation exercise. And that one's obviously the shrug. Personally, I prefer the dumbbells over a barbell, but machines or even cables can get the job done here. The key is, because we've already trained the traps fairly heavy through things like deadlifts, we force the muscle to stabilize heavy weight and pressed and pulled through different angles. We want to perform shrugs here with a more moderate weight so we can focus on a full stretch and a full contraction. We don't need to go in and do those half reps with 400 to 500 pounds that you see those guys in the gym doing, the guys with no traps. We're going to use moderate weights, not light. We're going to focus on having nothing but those traps moving. And if you've done everything up until this point, this is where we could really milk trap training and take our development to the next level. The traps recover fairly quickly. And because we're training them multiple times per week, when we're hitting our rows, our presses, and our deadlifts, when we perform direct trap work in the form of shrugs, we can sprinkle that training in pretty much anywhere where we could keep the quality of the work very high. It could be at the end of back training, at the end of shoulder training, or it could be a separate workout altogether. As you'll notice, these are all basic exercises. There's nothing fancy about them, they're not easy, and they all take a high level of total body strength to lift massive weights on. While over the years, there's been many claims for training the traps through special angles, odd rep ranges, tempos, frequencies, volumes, etc. But the fact is, if you go to any gym, Find the guys with the most impressive traps. Watch their training and see what they do. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to find that they're also the strongest lifters on those big compound movements. And you'll find them lifting heavy weights on rows, presses, and deadlifts. And of course, shrugging with proper technique. If you want a detailed explanation of the shrug technique that I personally recommend, make sure to check out the other videos on my channel where I cover that in detail. But if you're looking to build impressive traps, don't skip out on the heavy basics. These are movements that not only build muscles to the traps, but to the entire upper body. And if you're looking to build more muscle in general, and you want to do so using proven old school bodybuilding training methods, the link to all my old school mass gain programs are down below. And as always, if you guys want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.